Read to you a few things. One, the first thing are these haiku poems that are very traditional from these Japanese masters. The first one is Masaoka from the 19th century. Masaoka Shiki was his name. And they're very, very short expressions that usually have a lot to do almost exclusively with the natural world. So this is Masaoka Shiki's poem. A mountain village under the piled up snow, the sound of water. 19th century, Natsume Soseki. The crow has flown away, swaying in the evening sun, a leafless tree. And then some of you may know who Matsuo Basho is. Basho is probably one of the more popular poets from the 17th century. Autumn moonlight, a worm digs silently into the chestnut. So one of the ways that these poems are often talked about is as a moment of naturalness captured in one breath. This is why they're short and almost a meditation practice, almost like just a mindfulness practice on what is surrounding us. And it's very simple, as is in Zen, just the simplicity of encountering a moment in one breath only. And we do it through our senses, right? We do it through the direct experience that is unmediated by any more narrative than that, just than simplicity itself. I think in all of the conversations about the environment, especially the policies, the politics, people that we might call climate change deniers, now the narratives begin to start swirling up again, right? Here they come. Just naming these things, maybe some of you are feeling, a little bit of reactivity now as we enter back into those ideas. And so I think there is this, I don't know about you, but for me, there is this constant sort of movement between just how the miraculous display that is offered to us in the beauty of the natural world and also some of the dangers, but that there is this ecosystem is not just an ecosystem of things, right? But it is alive. It is a living ecosystem. And okay, this may be obvious. And yet we still have so much trouble collectively living with the world as opposed to living from it. And there are a few places I think that maybe have explored this. When I was in Vancouver several years ago, I was struck by how they built the cities and the populated areas sort of in concert with the natural landscape. Now, that's not to say there isn't landfill there, but you almost have this synergistic sense of the construction, the development, and the natural landscape that is really apparent there. The mountains, the trees, the coastline, very much apparent within kind of this urban area. And there are other places like this as well. So I'm going to show you a slide here. But if you notice, this Buddha statue has two mudras. One is the left hand on the Buddha on his lap, facing up. And then the other one the right hand is facing down. And this is what we call the Bhumisparsha. Bhumisparsha. Bhumi is earth or ground. Really, it literally means rootedness or ground. And sparsha is like the means close or touching. So the way this is usually translated is the earth touching or touching the earth. So the right hand is over the right knee down, touching the ground, touching the earth, and the left hand is palm up, which symbolizes wisdom. So whenever you see these Buddhist statues with the palms up, this is a sign of openness and wisdom, insight, and clear seeing largely. So the two together mean something. The two of these gestures, if you will, actually mean something. This Bhumisparsha. When the Buddha was under the Bodhi tree, and maybe some of you have heard this story, maybe you haven't, but he was constantly being tempted and by Mara, right? The foil in the stories of the Buddha. Mara is sometimes seen to be like a demon, but he's not. He's not an evil sort of devil kind of person. But largely, he represents all the things that seek to pull you off the path, to undermine your confidence in the teachings and in your capacities for meditation and for wisdom. Kind of the foil to everything that the Buddha stood for. And you have this sense in the early texts, in the early sutras, that the Buddha isn't like rebuking Mara with anger or aggression or righteousness, but the Buddha is constantly being tested by Mara to see how awake are you, right? Testing his skill, his insight, and so on. And in one text, the Buddha recognizes Mara as his old friend. Okay, maybe he's a nemesis, but he's also even our nemesis, if that's the plural of nemesis. Never actually thought about it, but how they actually can become allies, and we almost need them to progress, to see where are we in our path, on this path. Well, so near the end of his time under the Bodhi tree, the Buddha is beset by Mara's minions. He is challenged by all these different symbols, all these different, the snakes, the sensuality, Mara's trying to trigger fear from the Buddha, beings, a whole host of things, and the Buddha remains resolute, resolved, and in equanimity, right? And so finally he comes out of this, and Mara is recognizing that the Buddha has gotten very strong, and he says, great, well, there is only you here and me. This is Mara speaking. What on earth makes you think that you are awake if there is no one here to attest to your accomplishment? And using the skillful means that we know the Buddha embodied, he takes his hand and touches the earth. He says, the earth is my witness. It's something along those lines. He says, the earth bears witness to my enlightenment. And, Mara can't really say much about that. You can imagine just being slightly befuddled. Who's expecting that? So that's the Bhumisparsha, is this link between awakening and the earth, that they're not separate. And we see that here, the importance of not just the earth element, but the actual beingness, the presence of the earth. We often don't think of our planet as presencing us. We think of, oh, I am cultivating a sense of presence, and within my presence is an awareness or a mindfulness of interconnectedness, causes and conditions, trees, all this beauty, the miraculous display of the natural world. But we are being presenced. it's easy to forget that we are being witnessed by this world as well. And part of that is because we are deeply connected to it. So when I mentioned earlier this bit about climate grief, it makes sense that as the earth is changing, as we are losing certain species and kind of the coastlines are changing, there is suffering coming with this. There is naturally going to be grief associated not just with the loss of humanity or of our way of life, but also with the changes of the earth themselves. This is very natural. Um, so there is a karma here, right? There is a karma associated with this, um, a collective one. And sometimes it can feel as if, well, I would love to make more of a difference, donate more money to these causes that are really working on our behalf for the environment or whatever it may be. Um, and yet, sometimes it feels like there can be a bit of a helpless feeling in attending to the earth. Now, I don't know what you think, but for me, um, I think the earth is changing. It has changed. We are having to adapt regardless. There is no more, let's reverse the cycle, right? That's my opinion, but I suspect that others on this call also might hold that opinion, that we are needing to adapt now. Now we can perhaps keep it from just getting so bad that we basically uh, have to live underground or in very very different ways. There are ways that we can, as a collective, as a species, begin to live more in harmony with this earth that is bearing witness to us and what we do to it. Um, and yet there is still change that we're needing to adapt to, and that too perhaps is important, a part of the wisdom that we need to bear witness to as well. There are these lands that continue to exist in the world that the Tibetans call Bayul. I don't know if anyone is familiar with these hidden lands, secret lands, such as maybe you've heard of Shangri-La or Pamako. If anybody has read this amazing book by Ian Baker called The Heart of the World, it is an incredible read, and Ian Baker is just a prolific, brilliant writer. Um, he also has a presentation. I can't recall the trust that you can find it on, where he chronicles his 12-year journey of going back to Pemako in the Himalayas to seek this hidden Bayul, this hidden sacred land that is the embodiment of one of the great Dakinis. Uh, Dorje Pagmo, I believe, is the Dakini. And I've compiled, one evening I was very much inspired, and Lama Willa was inviting me to play some music for I think it's the Wild Dharma at Natural Dharma. Karen, is that right? Is it the Wild Dharma, the year of sort of eco-dharma? Am I getting that?
Rewilding the soul.
Rewilding the Soul. That was it. Thank you. Um, so I'm going to read you some excerpts from his book that I compiled into a poem. And so I didn't write this, but I edited this together as sort of an homage to largely to green Tara. And one of the ways that we can often see, especially in Tibetan Buddhism around these sacred lands, is that these places are actually represent the body of the goddess, of the Dakini, Dorje Pagmo, as well as Green Tara, that the landscape are different parts of her body. And as you make this journey through these really challenging landscapes, Everything from frozen snowy mountaintops to tropical rainforests sort of at the bottom, all within a given day of hiking into these different areas. So I'm going to read you this. It's called The Body of the Emerald Goddess. Safe in the innermost reaches of her heart, the green goddess of refuge and protection, the secret lotus of this mother of all Buddhas. Petals open to her innermost elusive center. Each one radiates outward, revealing a field of energy without boundary or end. The mountain is her heart, passing through mirror-like rock, enveloped in clouds, slowly lifting. Light strains through etheric veils of mist and rain. Her emerald body, the land of the lotus, bring life-giving waters through sequestered valleys. She is the meeting place between heaven and earth. This bliss-bestowing goddess, a hidden fortress of dakinis, dancing in water droplets, foaming cauldron, reddish granite, emerald palace, rainbow light. Form is a doorway to the formless. Descending in dark rain into hell realms, into paradise, seeking some semblance of a trail, yet gateways to her inner realms are silent, enveloped in enchantment. Shadows follow the body into sacred places and dissolve into rainbows. Bodhicitta, enlightened essence, circulating through body, mind, and universe. Her hidden land is already fully present, no longer seeking, opening to her vastness, in which nothing needs revealing. The hidden treasure of her heart, leaning in. Letting go, the veils reveal the intimacy that is beyond. Her doors, in response, open everywhere. So thank you, Ian Baker, for the inspiration here. And we often will see in Buddhism, we will see just how sacred the landscape is for Dharma practice all the way back in the very first of the Buddha's discourses, gathering his initial 5 monks, his first students, the first early Sangha who had been his friends, and teaching out in nature under the trees. And then we see these secret places where the Buddha tells us to practice walking meditation or sit under a tree in some quiet place and begin practicing mindfulness there. So he begins in actually the mindfulness text, the Satipatthana Sutra, by pointing out where you should go. And it's usually out under a tree or in nature. Walking meditation, feeling your feet touching the earth, and letting that be mindfulness. And he even talks about, there's a sutra where he talks about the fear that arises in walking in complete darkness in the jungle. Every step I hear the creatures of the night, and I'm paraphrasing, this isn't, I don't have it in front of me, but with every step, I hear the creatures of the night and fear arises. I simply walk mindfully and fear dissolves. And then once more, every step, the creatures of the night arise in the darkness and fear arises too. And I continue walking mindfully and being present and fear dissolves. And so here, one of the teachings here is just, how kind of, yes, furtive, but also sort of transient fear is as well. And he's almost, my sense is that he is echoing what we feel if we're in total darkness out in a place where there are creatures, the night creatures, right? I think there's some empathy there. That doesn't mean he wasn't afraid, but it's different to have this natural sort of limbic or even reptilian response to something you can't see. But what he's also telling us is that mindfulness helps to settle that sympathetic nervous system and continue to feel a sense of well-being in the midst of it. But that's the mindfulness practice. Yeah. And then later on, we see how the contemplative arts evolve in caves, people doing retreats in caves, in monasteries built into the side of these cliffs in the Himalayas and elsewhere. I mean, just this notion that we need to be away from the natural world in order to cultivate. And it's ironic that we're doing this on Zoom, right? We're having this conversation kind of a little bit in a groundless process. But each of us is in our own context surrounded by an actual physical world.